Ronke Onadeko is a member of the expert advisory panel at the Nigeria Natural Resource Charter. She joins us now from Lagos. Thank you very much, Ronke, for your time. So we've just aired a story on the emission tax introduced by the Nigerian government as part of efforts by the country to curb emissions. The government has pledged to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2030. But given the gap in the supply of power, is this a case of putting the cart before the horse?
Well, thank you for having me on the program. But you see, everything is working simultaneously. This decade in Nigeria is the gas decade. So a lot of things are happening simultaneously. So yes, there is need and there are plans to cut down greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions in the country. And on the other side, hand, we have a very concerted effort now of the government to stop, burning gas from oil fields. There's a lot of gas gathering plans going on. There's a lot of gas to power initiatives going on. So all of these things are happening concurrently, and the full picture all ties in if the plan goes through exactly how the government plans for it to go.
So the oil and gas industry accounts for around 86% of Nigeria's total export revenue and around 10% of its GDP. What is going to be the impact of halting funding of fossil fuel projects for oil-dependent countries such as Nigeria?
Well, first and foremost, the interesting thing is that Nigeria has its foreign reserves abroad. It's a substantial amount of money. The Nigerian government just needs to get themselves together, speak to the international banks that are holding funds for us, and make sure we leverage our foreign reserves that are in the European market, China and the US, and make sure those things work for us in Nigeria so that we're not going cap in hand looking for financial institutions that are going to back fossil fuel projects in Nigeria.
So Nigeria's vice president says that this global transition to cleaner energy should be inclusive, it should be fair, he says. What kind of support do these countries such as Nigeria need to help with the global transition to the zero emissions?
First and foremost, I'm a little bit of a divergent person. We have natural resources in Nigeria such as coal that we have not fully exploited. I don't see any reason why Nigeria is not going to first exploit their coal before we start going into the renewables. And obviously, Nigeria is more a gas-rich country than an oil-rich country. So there is need for us to also exploit our gas, which is a cleaner fuel. And then we can start to look at the renewables, solar, hydro, before we, exhaust all the sources. So we have quite a long way to go before we catch up with the Western world and their drive for complete, move from fossil fuels to the renewables. And more than that, I know in the recent past, some of these countries were still tinkering with coal, especially in Europe, and nuclear forms of power. So everybody should leverage on what they have as natural resources, first and foremost, especially when it comes to cost, availability and accessibility for Nigerians.
But let's talk about those renewables that you mentioned. In 2011, Nigeria updated its Renewable Energy Master Plan, which outlined measures to increase the supply of renewable electricity from 13% of total electricity generation in 2015 to 23% in 2025 and then 36% by 2030. Where is the country currently in achieving that?
Wow, we're very, very far. I don't even think the needle has moved at all. We're battling with a lot of things, not just the supply, but the transmission, the storage, the distribution, and also getting power into the rural areas. So our level of the areas where we need to focus on at the moment is more than anything else trying to make sure both the urban and the rural settings have electricity, means of transmitting the electricity there, minimal, distribution length, so we're not losing too much power between the source and the usage. So our issues are quite far away from us beefing up the quantity or the percentage of renewables that are going into the mix at the moment. I don't think that's the utmost priority for Nigeria at the moment. And I know that the government are paying it lip service, but not much has been done in that respect.
Okay, so now increasingly we're seeing and hearing talk all around the world about this global transition towards what they're calling the net zero emission. we're seeing some financial institutions, such as the World Bank, in fact, cutting down on funding for such kind of projects. Now, Dangote comes, invests $1.5 billion in an oil refinery, which is projected to churn about 650,000 barrels per day. So given this global transition, could this end up being a failed investment?
Well, I don't think so. The need for the Dangote refinery cannot be overemphasized. Nigeria, as it is right now, we're a net exporter of crude oil and a net importer of petroleum products because we have very low refining capacity locally. However, I mean, it's pertinent to mention at this point that Africa only constitutes 2 to 3% of carbon emissions in the world. So I don't know why the focus is on us to have to reduce our carbon emissions. You have countries like the US, India, China that are the major churners of greenhouse gas emissions. So I think the focus, we are not the ones who are making the rules. I think we need to lend our voice and get involved in the narrative to let them know the focus should not be on us at this time. The countries that are really churning out greenhouse gas emissions into the environment are the ones that need to find ways to manage that and reduce the emissions that they're putting in, because Africa apparently is the most vulnerable to these gases.